For you, God, tested us. You refined us like silver. You brought us into prison and laid burdens on our backs. You let people ride over our heads. We went through fire and water, but you brought us to a place of abundance. Psalm 66, 10 through 12. Woven throughout the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, it is evident that God is at work refining the lives of his creation. While perfectly providing free will for his people, God also provided a law to refine his people. However, due to sin, his people were unable to follow the law perfectly. Some people question God's divine intervention and wonder why it is necessary for their sin to be punished. Contrarily, others understand that the law was given for their safety, protection, and prosperity, and needed to be followed. By sneaking a quick glance at each of the Old Testament genres, the theme of God refining his people can be unearthed. Beginning in the genre of law, which consists of the first 5 books of the Bible, also known as the Pentateuch, according to benmin.org, we see some of the first examples of God refining his people. In Genesis chapter 6, we are told that the people on the earth were wicked and despicable. Humans sinned relentlessly without shame and paid no regard to the Lord that created them. This was all except for Noah. When God saw the disaster and destruction that was taking place on earth, he concluded that the only way to restore his creation was to destroy the unrighteous through a tremendous flood. At first glance, God's decision can seem harsh and even rash. But instead, God's decision reveals a common layer that can be seen in addition to the theme of refinement. God cannot permit sin. He is righteous, holy, and just. But he is also loving. Deuteronomy 32:4 says, "He is the rock. His work is perfect, for all his ways are justice. A God of truth and without injustice. Righteous and upright is he." End quote. What is often ignored in the story of the flood is that God presented mankind with countless opportunities to repent and to follow him, not so that he could have control, but for the prosperity of his own people. By choosing to ignore God's outstretched arm, the people destined themselves to the punishment of the flood. But God used Noah to lead a fresh generation to walk in the way of the Lord. Additional accounts of God refining his people can be observed in the book of Judges. The book of Judges is part of the historical or narrative genre of the Old Testament. The entire book encompasses the Lord trying to reach down to his people and redeem them from their sin. But with stubborn hearts full of evil, the people refused. The Israelites denied how the Lord had saved and guided them in their past. Judges 2:10 through 11 says, quote, "After that whole generation had been gathered to their ancestors, another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. The Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord and served the Baals." End quote. The Israelites' absolute denial of what God had done for them led God to allowing them to succumb to their own desires. Without the divine protection of God, the Israelites were like dust in the wind, and they were overcome by all their surrounding enemies. Though, just as God knew they would, the oppressed Israelites pleaded for the assistance of the Lord, and in his remarkable faithfulness, he answered their prayers by providing judges who followed his commands and rescued the people from their enemies. The judges helped shape the Israelites into who God wanted them to be. Furthermore, in the genre of wisdom and poetry, it should be noted that God refined his people through the book of Proverbs. Not every example of refinement includes the defeat of the Israelites or a massive sin issue. In the book of Proverbs, God uses King Solomon to send messages of wisdom to his people and future generations to come. Important messages like the value of wisdom being greater than that of gold or silver and the danger of laziness are included in the book. And each verse is a miniature message to the hearts of those that love God. Both for the modern reader and the ancient Israelite, Proverbs encourages man to seek after the Lord and place godly wisdom within the heart of mankind. God is the author of wisdom, and by seeking it, his people can be shaped to be more like him. Finally, we reach the genre of prophetic and apocalyptic literature. This concept can seem daunting and confusing to readers at first. With tales of things to come, discussion concerning the end of the world, and the Israelites' story threaded in between, books such as Isaiah, Daniel, Hosea, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel can be a tough pill to swallow. But it is within these books that we discover some of the richest aspects of God's love and the refining of his people. Specifically focusing on the apocalyptic genre, in Ezekiel 37, we are told of a vision sent to Ezekiel by God of a field of dry bones. Prior to the vision, the people of Judah had been exiled to Babylon. God did this as a result of their reckless sin and idol worship. The dry bones Ezekiel saw represented the Israelites who had lost all hope. But God tells Ezekiel to prophesy to the bones, also known as the Israelites, and give them hope that God will restore them to their homeland. He will rescue them from exile and place them under the rule of the ultimate king. He will put life back into their bones. As mentioned in an article from BibleProject.org, the idea of an apocalyptic beast in Daniel or of dry bones awakening in Ezekiel is pictured as the end of the world. But instead, it is the beginning of God's renewal. God took the strife and struggle of the Israelites and used it to begin creating a refined and restored people. It is not the destruction of all things good, but instead the destruction of sin and the refining of God's people. This demonstrates great significance to Christians today who are experiencing a season of struggle or hardship. God often allows difficulties to happen in order to refine and shape us into the people that he desires for us to be. Without continual refinement from the Lord, our faith would be stagnant. Thank you.